Beban House, a beautiful home of the early 1930s, is now a landmark heritage building in Nanaimo. It's also one of the most haunted places on mid-Vancouver Island. In the basement of Beban House is a storage area, a large room where they store boxes of pamphlets and brochures. Staff don't like going down there because when they do, often they hear heavy thumping overhead, as if somebody's dropping a very, very heavy object in the room directly overhead. Of course, no one is ever there. And one lady who heard these sounds for the first time ran out. She wouldn't come back into the building until she was assured that there was nothing there. Of course, there never is anything that people can see. Frank Bevan was born in New Zealand, arrived in North America and did very well in the lumber business. Ended up in Nanaimo, British Columbia. And in the 1930s, he'd done so well, he decided to buy a huge estate just north of town. He built a fabulous house, but in the early 1950s, he died. And after that, the house was sold, and by the mid-1990s, it was in such bad repair, they were going to tear it down until the heritage people got a hold of it, and they decided it was worth saving. And so they did. They restored the outside of it, and the inside was converted to offices. Now, Beban House is the home to Tourism Nanaimo. During the 1990s, a preschool used the Beban House, and a very interesting phenomenon took place. Although adults never saw the apparition, many of the children in the preschool did.
Well, one of the interesting happenings that's happened in the house was in the mid-'80s, when the house was used primarily as a daycare center and an after-school center. One of the leaders that had been working here for some time had one of the little boys come into the kitchen where the children were playing and coloring and such, and had asked where the little boy was, and he said that he was outside playing with the little boy with the red ball. She asked which boy that he was talking about, as the children were all accounted for. She asked him to draw a picture of the little boy. And she was shocked to see that it was the same picture that had been drawn by another 4-year-old 4 years earlier.
At the time of the preschool, only the children had seen the apparition of the child with the white gown and the red ball. But many years later, one of the former adult employees of the preschool was in the building and happened to see something out of the corner of her eye, and then she saw a child with a white gown and a red ball running up the stairs. She remembered the stories that the children had told her, and she ran up the stairs looking for it, but absolutely no one was there. This is the first instance we know of the validation of what those children had seen many years ago. It didn't take long before people realized that this was probably one of the children of the Beban's Chinese servant.
It's important to understand that children, young children, are very poor at reality testing. They literally cannot tell the difference sometimes between what's fantasy, what's imagination on the one hand, what's real on the other. Lots of children have imaginary friends. The young child actually believes and claims to be able to see the imaginary friend. All part of normal development. Gradually the child learns to tell the difference between fantasy and reality. If adults start to take this seriously, they may either think the child has some kind of mental disturbance, which isn't the case, or that there's literally some kind of ghost out there that the child sees. So one of the possibilities is that the suggestible teacher or adult says the child has seen something, the child has seen a ghost, forgetting that the child may have been fantasizing, or forgetting that there may have been some normal explanation for this. Over time, naturally, then as people start to take this story seriously, all sorts of things tend to confirm it. It becomes impossible to dissuade people about it. They're convinced that they've had first-hand experience with the little boy and the red ball.
Another interesting story was a while ago, some of our staff were working in an office here, and our offices have French doors in them that, as you'd expect to find in an old building of this kind. And all of a sudden they saw a flash, and something hit the French doors with such force that it damaged the lead beading in the door, and they couldn't find what it was that hit the door. They never found, and there was nobody else in the building at the time. So just the staff, and they presumed that the little boy with the red ball was playing with his ball, and just wanted a little bit of company.
The basement of Beban House is very haunted, particularly the room where the servant family had lived. That's where the child that played with the red ball had lived, and apparently still wanders, because people see things down there out of the corner of their eyes, shadowy shapes Some have said they have seen the child with the red ball just wandering in and out of the rooms in the basement of Beban House. People hear footsteps running up and down the stairs at Beban House, although some people just pass this off, some people can't. They're very unnerved by this.
We've had some interesting experiences, the people that work here. A little while ago, my bookkeeper was working away in her office, and all of a sudden I heard this little ooh sound. What the heck? Get up out of my desk and walk over to where she is. And she's coming out of the office just as I'm meeting her. And she says, there's this little yellow powder all over everything coming from the ceiling. And I say, yeah, right. There's nothing that can come from the ceiling. And so walked into her office, and sure enough, the desk is covered with this little yellow powder. So we dusted it off, and she went back to work. I went back to my office, and I no sooner got back to my office than the same thing. Oh, this sound. But as soon as I walked into her office, the powder shower, as it will, stopped. We did this another time, so 3 times the little powder fell from the ceiling.
When Frank Beban built his house, he put all the most modern fixtures inside, including beautiful ornate doorknobs. They're still there. They're very difficult to get off when people have purposely tried to take them off, and yet there's something very strange about those doorknobs, because when people are going to open the doors, the doorknobs just pull off in their hands.
Every spring, several of them fall off. And again, we don't know why they fall off, but they do, and they get screwed back on, and we check that they're tight, and everything is fine indeed until the next spring. It may be a ghost playing with us here.
If you believe that ghosts are inhabiting your building, you can come to attribute anything to them. If a doorknob doesn't work or it falls off, that's the ghost. Of course, if you're in an old building, and the doorknobs are old, they're going to fall off from time to time anyway. And so anytime they fall off or anytime a door lock jams, you take that as evidence for ghosts. It's interesting that people often see patterns in time. So people may say, oh yes, this happens more at one time of the year than another. If people keep records of when doorknobs fall off, I would be quite certain they'll find that the pattern that they perceive is not the real pattern that's there.
On one occasion, there was an event one evening at Beban House, and the following morning, early, a staff member came in. She was washing some dishes in the downstairs kitchen, and she wondered what was going on upstairs. Laughter, noises, teacups rattling. It sounded like somebody was having a great time. A tea party, she thought. Well, shortly, a staff member came in and joined her, and she said, what's going on upstairs? She hadn't had time to go and check herself. He said, there's nobody upstairs. We're here alone in the building. Very modern ghostly phenomenon is voicemail. It seems that the ghosts at Beban House like to play with the voicemail.
At Halloween last year, we had an event here, and we had hundreds and hundreds of children coming to Beban House to enjoy a pretty spooky experience. And we had a spooky experience of our own that night. I was working during the evening, and my office door was closed. But when I left, I thought, well, there were still a few people around, so we should leave the office looking a little bit in keeping with the event.
And as part of the effect, he left his phone dangling off the hook. No one bothered to put it back that evening, so the phone was completely engaged all evening. When he went in the next morning, he put it back on, and just happened to listen. There was a voicemail message. Obviously, no one could have called in the night before, but there, on the voicemail, was the sound of thumping. It was really quite unnerving. And also, noises, laughter, people running, almost like children had been playing in the building. A female employee one morning came in and listened to her voicemail messages at Beban House, and she was amazed to hear thumping on the voicemail. It went on for some time, just as though somebody had been walking through the entire house during the night, but somehow it was recorded on the voicemail. She was really quite frightened. The voicemail at Beban House. Very haunted. On the second floor of Beban House, where the family's bedrooms were, people have seen the form of a very attractive woman.
One of the housemates tells a story that happened a couple of years ago to him. He was leaving his office, just locking up, and he turned around just out of the corner of his eye. He saw a woman standing at the doorway to our office, And he turned around completely to see who it was, and of course there was no one there.
And they don't know who she is. Some have speculated it could be Mrs. Beban herself. Beban House is a landmark heritage building in Nanaimo, and it's had an interesting history with lots of ghosts. A small child, the ghost of a beautiful woman, footsteps, and an array of other things. It's one of the most haunted places on mid-Vancouver Island.